Hi, this is Gilbert Gottfried, and this is Gilbert Gottfried's amazing, colossal podcast.
That's not it.
Oh! Hi, this is Gilbert Gottfried, and this is Gilbert and Frank's amazing, colossal obsessions. I'm here with my co-host, Robin Quivers. And
Ouch.
once again, being recorded by Fred Norris.
Uh-oh.
No, Frank Santopadre.
Yeah.
Is here. And we're at Nutmeg with our engineer, Frank Verderosa.
Yeah.
Those other people, I barely remember what they look like.
And who might our guest be this week?
Okay. Our guest is Jackie the Joke Man Martling.
Perhaps you've heard of him.
Have.
Jack, welcome back.
Well, thank you very much. And why don't we start out with the worst show business story I've ever heard in my life?
Okay.
Steve Rossi told me this, and he died with this story, so we'll never know. When he was a young guy starting out, he was a crooner, and he got a job as the MC for Mae West's stage show in 1948. Her stage show, she was already old, not crazy old, but old, and her stage show was she had like 8 bodybuilders full of oil in slingshot bathing suits, and she'd walk up and down and rub them and say what was lewd at the time. There probably wasn't lewd. So Steve auditioned, and the first night he did it, he was hired, and he was in his dressing room or his hotel room rather, and she called him up and said, "Come to my room." So I have no idea. So Rossi goes to Mae West's room. She says, "Come over here," and she's sitting on the bed. Steve Rossi's like 22, however old.
And he was Steve Rossi. This was the straight man.
This is
Marty
Steve.
Allen.
Yeah,
Rossi.
no Marty Allen yet.
Right.
He's just
Yeah.
a crooner
Allen Rossi.
trying to find his way in show business. And she unbuttons his pants,
Oh, no.
takes off his belt, pulls down his pants and his underpants, takes out her false teeth, puts them in a glass of water on the table by the bed, gives him a blowjob, and as he's coming, he goes, "Ah!" And he pulls off her blonde wig. And he said he's standing there looking at this bald woman with no teeth, with a mouthful of his jizz, and he said, "I guess I'm in show business."
Oh, wow.
I said to him, "If that's a lie, I don't care. It's the best story I've ever heard." He swore it was true.
Oh, wow.
And good night.
Good night. That's an icebreaker.
Wow.
Is that a beauty, Gilbert? Come
Yes.
on.
man.
That is a beauty. Oh, man.
Oh,
Wow.
my God.
Now I'm really sorry we didn't get Steve Rossi
Yes,
on here.
It's funny and scary at the same time.
It's everything. And it borders on believable.
Yes.
It really does. It really does.
So, wow.
If you were going to say that's a bullshit story, where would you start hacking away at the truth? She definitely wore a wig. She probably gave blowjobs. She, of course, had false teeth.
Right.
And, of course, Rossi would have gone for it. You know what?
Well, I believe it's true. It's not exactly bragging.
No. Hey, guess what I did last night?
So, Jack, you were here before. We did a great episode with you. One of
I
our
got
most
so much
popular.
incredible feedback from doing this. It's so
you?
flattering to be invited back here. I can't tell you. It's great.
Who gave
Everybody
you
loves
feedback?
your podcast. It's so good.
That's sweet. Thank you. And we want to thank you, too, for the guests that you helped us get. We were talking about outside. Tommy James came through you. The great Mark Hudson was one of our funniest episodes.
Oh, he's great.
Oh, he was terrific.
Mark walked in and just floored us immediately before we even got in the booth.
Yeah, he came up to us in like the kitchen area and had about 20 stories.
And
19 of them were about Cher.
Exactly.
a good many of them.
Yes.
I don't think
Yes.
I don't think we told any of those on the air.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But also Billy J. Kramer and Will Jordan. So we're grateful to you.
Great characters. I'm telling you, you got to get Woody Woodbury. He's sharp as a tack.
Woody Woodbury,
He
Gil.
is a real classic. I mean, he had Who Do You Trust Before Carson. So
Yeah.
please, I mean, we were stealing jokes from each other in 1979. He was already an antique. I don't know how else to
a
say
relic.
it, you know.
Yeah.
And that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we're glad Woody's still around. We'll get him. So your book, and the reason you're here, Bow to Stern.
Yes, sir. The Joke Man Bow to Stern. You know, I've been working on it for so long and collecting stories for so long. And the first time I had a manager, Rory Rosegarden was my manager. He's a great guy, still one of my
I know Rory.
One of my
That was
dear
Robert
friends.
Klein forever.
And he thought that Mel Berger would be interested in a book by me. And my opening to my book, the first time I submitted it to somebody, the preamble was, I'm sitting here in a cafeteria at JFK Airport waiting for Gilbert Gottfried so we can go out to Las Vegas to do that stupid show, The Watcher. And I had just gotten notice from Rory, you know, not through email or anything. He had just called and said, hey, I think I might be able to get you a book deal. And that's when I started. And I started making, putting stories together. Then the web happened. So when the web happened and there were all these stories that I told on the show, the Stern Show was so funny because I would tell stories to them and they'd look at each other like, this guy's a jerk. And after I was there a couple months, they started thinking to themselves, he's telling the truth of these horrible stories. So I started putting them on the web and I just accumulated so many stories. So the book is stories. It's modular stories,
Yeah,
a
good
lot
stories.
about me, but then a lot about the Stern Show stuff. And there's nothing really, you read it. It's
Well, it's also a lot about Rodney and Joe Ansis and
Right.
people and characters like Louis Nye show up and
yeah, and it's not
Richards.
behind the back stabs or anything.
No.
Everybody knows everything about the Stern Show. All the crappy stuff he did, everybody knows.
you can't really tell a tell-all about the
No,
about
there's
the
no
Stern
tell-all,
Show. Yeah.
But I love it, and I finally got a deal on with Post Hill Press, and it's coming out October 24th on Kindle and on Audible. Who's one of your sponsors, or used to be?
Yeah, I believe so. I think Audible
Did you
was a
do an
sponsor.
audio version of any of your books? I know you've had books.
Yeah, of Rubber Balls and Liquor.
That's the greatest. Oh God, that's the first punchline I remember too. And
I knew you would know it.
oh my, Rubber Balls and Liquor, Johnny Fucker Faster. So I'm thinking, oh, what a drudgery to go in and record your book. And I went in and sat there and read 300 pages. I was ready to read it again. I really enjoyed
See,
myself.
me, I
Good read.
fucking hated every second.
Did
of
you
it.
really?
Yes.
Wow, I really enjoyed, and the guys enjoyed the stories, and they really enjoy. I don't know whether maybe I was scared or something, but Artie Lang did my forward, and he also read his forward. So, for the people that know me from the Stern Show and know him, to hear my voice, it's a good thing. If they can handle it. I'm surprised you didn't.
Yeah. If I do another book, Morgan Freeman's going to.
James Earl Jones.
Hello, I'm Gilbert Gottfried.
This book was gestating since before the web.
That's
a
way
long
before,
fucking time.
forever. And I wrote a book. I started writing the book of my life in the 70s, and as a product of the 60s with JFK and everything. So the name of my first book was Profiles in Discourage.
It's funny.
Which goes way back.
And I remember when we did The Watcher, and that was a weird time when all these stations were advertising that they were brand new stations, and they all had like new shows, all of which lasted about a month.
10 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Right. They and the stations came and went. It was like
Yes.
there was like a revolving door. It was really crazy. But, it was fun while it lasted, right?
Yes.
Our Channel 9 show was on Channel 9, which was a superstation for 5 minutes.
Oh,
and
yeah,
I never
yeah.
understood what superstation meant.
And what I remember best about The Watcher is we're two thugs in it, and at one point we get into a massive fight. So they get these stuntmen who are both 7 feet tall
To play the two of you?
and barrel-chested.
Did you ever go back and actually look at that?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
It looks nothing like us
It's-
at all.
Oh, that was just the funniest.
And it's like the two of us for close-ups, we're struggling and we could barely walk. And these guys are doing these leaps in the air.
Right, you see these two monsters poolside, and then there's me and Gilbert, these two little bodies floating in the pool. It made no sense.
So you wanted to write the perspective from Jackie's chair. You wanted to give people some
That's
insight
absolutely
into
what it is. It's there's nothing new in there that people don't know about. But the great thing is it's a time capsule.
It is.
You
It
know,
is.
like I know where I was when the movie hit. I know where I was when the Channel 9 show hit. So people are, they get to jump off into their own little world. And there's a lot of funny stuff, a lot of goofy stuff.
Tell us a little bit about Rodney, who keeps turning up in the book. We just had Richard Lewis here, and he told us some Rodney stuff. And Gilbert told his own Rodney story.
The greatest, I wrote down some things to say, there's a story that's not in the book, and it's not even my story, but I got to tell it to you. But I was with Rodney. I sent him a joke. Comics lie to each other, especially in the beginning. They lie about how good they're doing. And Richie Minervini was my good friend, and there was no East Side Comedy Club or anything. We're working in little places, and I'm putting my amplifier, and we're doing shows. It's a great story. I was playing my guitar and singing my songs in this little crappy bar in Huntington. It was a couple days before Christmas. There's nobody in the bar except maybe one couple and Scottish bartenders at the other end. And I'm singing my cheery songs and telling my dick jokes and playing my cheery songs. And all of a sudden, this Scottish bartender says, "Jack, they want you outside." And I said, "Who?" And he said, "Everybody." To this day, I don't like telling that story. So Minervini comes in and says, "Oh, man, I went on the Dangerfields and I killed Rodney Love Me. I'm going to be on TV." And I got so jealous. I sat down and took every old joke I knew and made it a Rodney joke. Mm-hmm. And Minervini shows up and I said, "Look, I got all these jokes. Give them to your friend Rodney." He said, "Oh, I lied. I didn't meet Rodney. I didn't get on stage." He said, "But I was there." And he hands me a matchbook with the address. So I wrote Rodney Dangerfield, care of the address, and sent it. 2 days later, the phone rings, and I'm at my grandmother's. Nobody has the number because she just died. The phone rings, and I'm there with my girlfriend. I said, "Hello?" I said, "Who is this?" He says, "Rodney." I said, "Rodney who?" He said, "I knew you were fucking funny. I knew you were funny." Some of these jokes is fucking funny, So I met him, and we got to be somewhat pals. I sold him some jokes, and I wound up going away with him for 2 weeks. And then I'm still thinking of crap that happened. I told him when we first were going on I said, "Every time you open your mouth, I'm going to be entertained, and I'm going to have a fucking party. What do I care, But he was just such a hoot and just a delight because that was him. It wasn't, let me put on this character when I go on stage. It was this downtrodden.
Right.
And I don't know if he's actually miserable, but he just, he was all beat up.
A misanthrope.
Yeah,
Rodney. Answering the door with the bathrobe open
and we've all seen that,
right.
Like it's almost like, welcome to Comedy 101, the open ratty blue bathrobe with the balls that, down to his ankle. So listen to this story. So John Fox was a very funny comic. He'd passed away a couple of years ago, and him and Rodney were working on Rover Dangerfield, which was an animated.
Oh, sure.
Animated.
Yeah.
So they're in Las Vegas.
With Ronnie Shell.
They're way up in the penthouse, and they're going down in the elevator. And Fox said they were going down in the elevator, and the elevator stopped, and this tiny little Asian woman got in the elevator. So they go all the way down to the main floor, and the door opens. There's 100 people waiting to get in the elevator. But on the way down, Fox said Rodney cut the loudest, most disgusting, smelly fart he'd ever heard in his life. And they get to the bottom floor, and the doors open up, and as they walk out, Rodney turns to the woman and says, "You're really fucking disgusting, Now, for no reason at all, but no reason but to be goofy.
What was the joke, by the way? The big joke, the one that he loved, the one that the first one, the one that he kept in the act for years.
I was living at my grandmother's, and my buddy was in Peru, selling coke, buying coke, doing coke. And he called me in the middle of the night, like 3 or 4 in the morning. The phone rang, and he knew me well enough to know I was probably drunk. So he kept me on the phone long enough so I would remember the phone call. He said, "Chief, there's a joke. This guy, Tennessee Bob told me this joke. Tennessee Bob told me Tennessee two-bagger." And I sent it to Rodney as the Tennessee two-bagger, which he got rid of the Tennessee. But the joke was, and Rodney swore it was his best joke ever. He said, "Yeah, she was so ugly. She was known as a two-bagger. That's a girl so ugly, you not only got to put a bag over her head, you got to put a bag over your own head in case her bag rips."
A great joke. A great joke.
And Carson went right off his chair, and so that and that cemented me to him forever, and it was great fun. Great fun.
And what was amazing when Rodney went on Carson, he would do his set.
It was an
that
event.
would be great. And then he'd sit on panel. That would be a whole separate set.
But it was a whole other set. It was
Yes.
like when he did the two-bagger, he was sitting on the panel.
Was he testing new material on panel, or he was just extending the set?
No, he didn't do nothing on everything
Yeah.
on Carson. You watched him. It was so time-tested.
He was amazing.
It was hard to get a joke into his Carson set, and it was hard to get a joke into his actual act.
Right.
You know.
Johnny would just say, "So how you doing?"
Yeah. Well, I'm okay now, but last week I was in rough shape.
Yeah, this one, the greatest, he did his stand-up for 7 minutes, then he sat down, and for 7 minutes he barreled, destroyed the place.
Yeah.
And when he was done with his last joke, he turned to Johnny and said, "What's new with you?" Oh, he's great. He's great.
And then he would have, out of nowhere, he'd just say to Johnny, like, "But you got to take care of your health."
Yeah, health is what's most important.
Or Johnny'd say, "How's your health?" He goes, not yet, Johnny. Health later, We're going to be so spontaneous, but we'll get to it later,
There's a nice story in the book about Rodney and Paul Williams too, with Paul doing Rodney doing a nice thing for Paul. Really,
See, I went to Fort Lauderdale with him, and then went to Vegas where he was headlining, but it was him and then Paul Williams Orchestra. And Rodney said, "No, comic opens, and then the music. You don't do music and then show business 101, So Paul Williams was so thrilled that Rodney did that he let him take his private jet to Los Angeles to do the reaction shots for Caddyshack. This is 1980. And then Paul loved Rodney, and brought us over to his house in Las Vegas. And it was I called Paul Williams about a year or two ago, or sent him an email and asked him if he remembered the afternoon in Las Vegas. He said, bouncing off the walls with Rodney Dangerfield for 5 hours. What do you mean, do I remember it,
It's one of the few things he does remember.
Yeah, I think he sobered up after that. But, we got so stoned and so coked up and so crazed.
Oh, my God.
And it was so fun. And Rodney's sitting there going, "How do you come up with those songs, Paul?" And he goes, "Oh, Rodney, they're in the air. They're just in the air. There's no getting over that rain. But that's fucking beautiful, Paul. They're in the air. That's fucking, oh, God. I thought I was going to die."
Rodney Dangerfield singing the Rainbow Connection.
Oh, my God.
in
But
heaven.
I mean, he must have sang, he must have said the opening line, 20 times.
Right.
And Paul's wife at the time, Katie, loved Rodney, so he just kept breaking out, Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm like, pinch me. And I'm adding to the festivities. I felt like I fit in. You know what I mean? So that was a great, great time. Wow. Years later, this anecdote has nothing to do with anything, but I was working in one of these shitholes in the middle of, I think, Knoxville. Funny Bone in Knoxville. And
I'm sure Dill's played it.
I was doing a talk show, and it was so long ago that Crook and Chase, Charlie Chase and whatever her name was a little local show in Knoxville. Then they became huge, and now they're gone. They're probably dead, but they came and went. But they had this little local talk show, and Paul Williams was on before me. And I hadn't seen him in years since that, and I'm sure he wouldn't have remembered me, or maybe he would have, but I didn't beat him up to say hello or anything because we crossed paths. But he was sitting there. I'll never forget this. And they're like, "You are such a great songwriter. Everything you write is so good. Have you ever written anything that wasn't a hit?" And he goes, "Oh, yeah." And they said, "Like what?" He said, "Brown Christmas."
God bless Paul.
It's so funny. So funny.
Here's something I didn't know from the book, Jack. I didn't know that you started out as a guest on Howard's NBC show. That was where the relationship began.
I met Howard the exact same way I met Rodney. When I started out, I made all these I made an album, and I borrowed money for it's all in the book. It explains, like, I learned how to make an album. I knew all these dirty jokes. I said, well, I'm going to make an album full of dirty jokes for whatever reason. Like Red Fox, I made an album full of dirty jokes, and then I made another one, and then I made another one. And as it went along, when I put out an album, I sent it to everybody. If I met you on the street, I still run into people and say, "Hey, you gave me a fucking album 40 years ago." If you could help me, maybe you can't help me. Here's an album.
I love how you sent one to Mad Magazine and you got a Don Martin cartoon back.
Great. I got a half price off on a micro cassette from the Japanese company that wrote back and said, "We don't have any idea what you're doing, but you seem to have a lot of energy." So every time I put out an album, I send it to everybody. And by 1982, I had 3 albums out, and she was going to be my wife, but my girlfriend Nancy and I worked together. And we sent the 3 albums with matching cassettes and all our promo to everybody I came in contact with. Just throwing it against the wall. No idea what I'm doing. And then I was in Washington, D.C. at Garvin's Laughing.
Oh, my God,
and
yes.
Harry Montecruso.
Garvin's Grill.
Right. And Harry Montecruso says, hey, there's this wild man that did broadcasts in his underwear on Fridays, and he just got fired. He's going to NBC in New York. You should look him up. I have no idea who this guy is. I didn't listen to the radio. I was a hippie. So we just sent my 3 albums blind, Howard Stern care at WNBC, just like we had sent out literally 300 or 400 packages like that. And one day, Nancy called me up. I was in my mother's attic. That was Jokeland, my mother's attic, with my dial joke machines and everything. And she said, hey, that disc jockey Howard Stern called. He wants you to call him. So I called him. He got right on the phone. Said, hey, we listened to your albums. You know every joke. Why don't you come in and hang out on the air? We're going to judge a talent contest over the telephone. I'm like, okay. It was a rainy Tuesday in February of 1983. I'll never forget. And I had sent the albums a couple months before, but it took them a while to get settled. I drove in, 30 Rock, and then, I go up, and there's Fred, and there's Robin, and there's Howard, and I sat down, and we laughed for 4 hours, and at the end of 4 hours, they said, you're a lot of fun. You want to come back next week? And I came back once a week for 3 years for free, and then we went to mornings, and then we went to fucking Pluto.
Right.
And I'd slowly but surely
it exploded.
Started giving them lines and kind of, put working my way into the crux of the whole thing.
And what was so funny is when there'd be a feud going on between you and Howard, and he was insulting you, you'd be slipping him the insult lines to insult you with.
People have trouble wrapping their brains around that. It's all for one for all. It was and it'd be like, don't say that. So we got to interrupt this with a joke. So a guy goes in a bar and he's having a few beers and he goes into the bathroom and there's a guy bent over the sink and there's a guy behind him fucking him in the ass. And there's a guy behind him fucking him in the ass. And the guy's like, geez, he goes to the bartender. He says, what's going on in this place? I go in there. There's a guy bent over the sink, a guy behind him fucking him in the ass, a guy behind him fucking him in the ass. What the hell kind of place is this? And the bartender says, the guy in the middle, do you have on an orange shirt? He says, yeah. He says, that's Bob. He's lucky in cards, too. I had to get that one in there. I knew you hadn't heard that.
Fantastic. There's a fun story about hanging out with Louis Nye, too, in the book. You get a girl and you go back when you're on tour with Rodney, and you bring her back to Rodney's...
We're in Fort Lauderdale, and I was so horny. I was freaking out, and I said, because it's spring break, and everybody, all the girls are college girls in bikinis, skimpy bikinis, and we're at the Bahia Mar in the thick of everything, right on A1A. I don't know if it's in the book. One day, I swear to God, he said this, which is just, it's so Rodney. We're walking along the beach, and these girls are unbelievable. And he just turns to me and says, don't you wish you could just fuck anybody you wanted? For no reason.
Out of the blue.
Why would you say that? Of course. So I said, I'm gonna go and find myself a girl. He said, well, good luck with that, So I went and got drunk at the Elbow Room on Las Olas, and I drank it till I met a girl, and we came back, and I wanted to show her who I was with. I didn't tell her who I was with. I wanted to surprise her. I knocked on the door, and Roddy, he was surprised because, I succeeded. And he says, come in. And I'm like, holy, it's Louis Nye standing there. Who was like,
oh, geez.
And I was weaned on Steve Allen and I.O. Steve Areno and Tom Poston and Don Knotts.
Sure, Bill Dana.
And Bill Dana. Oh, it's just fantastic. And then we were all sitting around the pool the next day or a couple days later because Louis Nye had a one-man show in town. And I was sitting with Glenn Hirsch and Peter Bales, Bob Nelson, Larry Miller, Dennis Wolfberg, Paul Reiser. We're all working at this comic strip. I hadn't even worked there yet, and I finagled Rodney into going, after we went to see Louis Nye, I finagled him into going to the comic strip. And I come walking into the comic strip, and Rodney's behind me, and Paul Reiser's eyes popped out. And then the pièce de résistance, Louis Nye's behind Rodney, and he's like, and Reiser's like, you arranged this? And everybody killed, and I invited the guys over to the pool, and we're all sitting around laughing and breaking balls with Rodney, and Louis was sitting all alone. I said, hey, guys, let's go talk to Louis. And they're all like, no, you don't want to bother Louis. Now, I'm like, the fuck are you talking about? I'm sure he'd love nothing better. And we walked over there and said hello, and we didn't get a word edgewise for 2 hours. He just went on and on and on. He was so thrilled to talk about the Steve Allen Show, of course, Great fun.
Another guy we never got, Gil.
And you, I always say this, way before, now it's just commonplace. Every single comic has merch. And, that they're selling bumper stickers, tapes, blah, blah, blah. And you were like the first.
Like Bill Cosby and those guys, they signed with huge record companies and had big record deals, blah, blah, blah. But I found out from working in a studio that you could make a homegrown album. So I actually recorded an album on cassette and chopped it up with a razor blade and all that stuff. All this stuff is in the book because it's such a good story. And I got these albums, and there's so many stories about the albums, but I would take them to gigs. And I'd stand at the door and sell my albums for $5, and the other comics would break my balls. They'd make fun of me. Until one day somebody said, wait a minute, we each made $40, and he made an extra $80 selling a stupid album. What an asshole he is, And I just kept going and going and making more albums, and it was always fun, But and people to this day, people break my, Sinbad used to say, yeah, Jack used to always have knickknacks. Jack had knickknacks.
Gil, you've been known to sell a little merch at a at a venue.
Yeah.
Oh, please.
And I was one of those that got on it late because I'd be at all these gigs, and the opening act, who was like 13, he'd have
a stack of CDs 2 feet high, and
and he'd be selling like crazy, and.
It was a hoot.
Tell us a little bit, too, with somebody who also comes up in the book and came up the last time you were here, and that's Joe Ancis. For people that don't know, only hardcore comedy people would even know who he was.
I
think he lived in my building, by the way.
Really?
South 74th Street.
I met him a bunch of times. He's a very quiet guy. I don't remember what I said last time and what but Joe was the guy that used to yell. There was a certain line that people would yell. Did I talk about that last time?
Well, tell us again.
Well, Rodney and him were great friends. It was Joe Ancis and Rodney and Buddy Hackett and Lenny Bruce and all those guys, I guess, hung out 57, 55, 50, whatever. They were a pack, and I guess they all had fun and broke balls. But Joe was like the funniest guy. There's always somebody in the group that's a
never
pisser,
got on stage,
but he was frightened to death and he wouldn't, But and he was scared. He was a big, tall guy, but he was like kind of hunched over and scared of his own shadow, and. But he'd be in the back of Dangerfields. In the middle of Rodney's act, he'd go, so what do you do for a living? And Rodney go, I get guys for your sister. Why don't you come in the bathroom? I'll show you how small you really are. And bring the house down. And then when we went to Las Vegas, I was the guy in the back of the room yelling that out. And I always felt so inside,
Yeah.
But Joe, he was a very nice guy. But, I spent a couple nights hanging out with him and Rodney a little bit, and he probably said 4 words, But he couldn't have been nicer. Couldn't have been nicer.
Yeah, they always said he
was the funny guy.
Like, he was the funny guy who, like other comics, their famous bits came from him.
Right, especially Lenny Bruce, supposedly. Yeah. Who knows? But it was funny that he never, ever, on a bet, or supposedly he never took the stage ever, which is,
Wow.
Strange.
Kind of great. Yeah, I think it's great.
Just didn't have it in him.
Yeah, really. Yeah. He was literally petrified.
Yeah. Which
is great. And he was huge, Go figure. So here's a joke I always end my act with.
Okay.
A cab driver picks up a nun. A cab driver picks up a nun. He looks in the rearview mirror and says, sister, I always fantasize about being with a nun. She says, yeah, you and everybody else. Are you Catholic? Yes, I am. She says, pull over. He pulls over. She gets in the front seat and gives him the best blowjob he's ever had. She gets done. He feels guilty. He says, sister, I got to tell you something. I'm not really Catholic. She says, yeah, my name's Ralph. I'm going to a costume party.
I'm going to tell him to buy your book. We'll come back. We're going to come back and do a part 2 with this. The book is called Bow to Stern. It's Jackie's memoir. It's Jackie's fly on the wall view.
What about The Joke Man, Bow to Stern?
The Joke Man, Bow to Stern.
Kindle, Audible audio version, and hardcover.
We're going to give you a chance to do those plugs again because we're going to stop here and start again and do a second one. What do you think of that?
I might go down on you.
All right. Gil?
And this has been Gilbert and Frank's Amazing Colossal Obsession with Jackie the Joke Man Martling, Part 1.
Colossal obsession.